Friday, Baylor College of Medicine and Friends of Baylor. So I've been getting a lot of questions, mostly from my sister, about what's going to happen this winter. Are we going to have another surge? And so I thought I would take the time today to try and sort of review and make an educated guess, because really nobody knows. But let's start looking at what's going on in the rest of the world. It's really interesting because Europe is beginning a surge. It's unfortunate, but if you look at Spain, Italy, Germany, they're all getting hot again, which gives us some insight because many times we follow what happens in Europe by about a month. And again, you know, all the talk about we're over the pandemic, not so much. So if you think about it, 300 Americans have died every day for the past 3 months from COVID. There are about 50,000 new infections reported every day in the United States. And that was the case in September. And by the way, we know that's a vast underestimate because many, many people are testing at home. Almost all of these cases are being caused by the Omicron lineage, which is BA2, BA4, and BA5. And you know, what's really interesting is this coronavirus keeps evolving very, very rapidly. There have been over 200 new Omicron sublineages that have already been developed. And if you look at it from an evolutionary perspective, you know, when Omicron started about a year ago, it's become the dominant strain. So it's almost acting like it's it's like a separate strain in the same way kind of flu has. You know, if flu has influenza A, B, and C, and this is acting like almost a different serotype. So Omicron is so much different from Wuhan, the original Wuhan virus that was isolated there, that, you know, Delta virus, very closely related to the original virus, but Omicron is actually very, very different. And so all the lineages that are developing, it's almost acting like a separate serotype. Now, in the U.S., cases are looking good. Our number of cases goes down, but that's a little bit misleading because we do have some hot spots. Kentucky, and if you look, the Northeast is getting a little high again. The good news for Texas is we're quite low. Harris County's low and Dimmitt County are low. We had last week 35 cases per 100,000. So that's really, really great. And our Texas Medical Center data is really strong. Only 3.5% of tests were positive. We're under 73 admissions per day. That's still 73 a day. And the best news probably is our wastewater data. As I've said many times, that precedes about by 2 weeks what's going to happen here. And you can see wastewater continues to drop. Now, that's the good news. So there is some bad news, though. So if you look at, this is from the CDC at their wastewater, all the blue lines, all the blue area is communities where wastewater is falling. All the red data here is communities where wastewater is going up. And so while in general it's going down in the United States, you can see some areas where there's still an emerging hotspot of coronavirus. And so if you look at our wastewater data in Texas, all the blue dots are very good, but I put Massachusetts here in comparison. Massachusetts is going up. And if you look at Boston had a 100% increase in its wastewater viral burden in the last 2 weeks. And remember, the Northeast kind of predicts what happens here by a couple of weeks in advance, and Europe kind of precedes what happens in the Northeast by about a month. So if we start looking at what's going on in the UK, well, it's hot with BA4-5, Omicron, and then the BA2 strain is emerging. So what about the strains here in the US? Well, BA4.6 in particular is growing, and you can see it's beginning to displace BA5. So, you know, when people ask me, is there going to be a winter surge, you got to sort of consider a couple of things. First of all, think about the virus. Is the virus changing, and is it evolving in a way to evade immune detection? Also, what's the immune status in the U.S.? How many people have been infected? How many people have been vaccinated and boosted? And then, you know, even if you are infected or having been vaccinated, how long does your immunity last? Because it wanes over time. And then maybe we can infer something from what's going on with flu season. So let's start off with the virus. It's really kind of remarkable what's happening with the virus. This tree gives you a great example of the tremendous number of mutations that are happening. So the original Omicron strains, BA5 and BA4 and BA2 here, they're all mutating, and they're mutating all the time. And there's a new version of a descendant of BA5, that's BQ1, that's in the United Kingdom. There's BA 2.75 that's in India, and there's a bunch that are in Singapore, Denmark, and Australia that emerged from BA2. Now, this is a great example of what's called convergent evolution. So lots of mutations all over the world, but they're beginning to converge on certain specific mutations that they all share in common. Even though they're in different parts of the world, all these mutations are happening, but they get selected for because they tend to evade immunity in people. And so all these are moving towards immune evasion so that they can reinfect the population. There's one epidemiologist, J.P. Weiland, who sort of predicted that BA5 will continue to fall in the red line, but that as these accumulate, these other mutations are adding on 2 and 3 and 4, 5 changes. As we get towards 5 changes, there's a sense that maybe that will begin to emerge and begin to skyrocket in the fall and in the winter. So pretty good evidence that the virus continues to mutate and avoid immunity, and so there's this resurgence in Europe. So that would suggest that we probably will see something similar in the United States. Well, what about the immune response? Well, we've done pretty well in people getting their first series of vaccinations. 80% of the country has been vaccinated with 1 or 2, their first primary series. Only 50% has had this first booster, and only 35 to 40% have had the second booster, and then the bivalent booster, only 4%. So if you think about immunity and the way the vaccine immunity works is it wanes over time, over 4 to 6 months. Even though almost 2/3 of the population has probably been infected, that immunity is also waning. So unless you've had an updated booster, and particularly the bivalent booster that is targeting BA5, we still have a very large susceptible population. And so the virus is changing, the population is getting to be susceptible. We're not keeping up with the vaccines. Can we learn something about what's going on with other respiratory viruses? Well, let's look at flu. Well, we talked about it last week. Flu is really on a huge surge upward. We're in advance of what we've had in the past. So flu is going to be bad this season. It was a very bad flu season in Australia in their winter season. So we anticipate this will be a very bad flu season. The only good news is that if you look at it's a quadrivalent vaccine, 2A and 2B strains. The good news is most of the flu viruses are being covered in the vaccine. So again, get your bivalent booster and get your flu vaccine, and if you can do it at the same time, get them all done. Get it out of the way. My sister asked me that. I said, get them both done. So, what do you think? Winter surge or no? Well, based on the rise in Europe, this increase in wastewater number in Boston and Massachusetts and the Northeast going up, the relatively slow uptake for bivalent viruses, the waning immunity in the country, the continued evolution of the virus to evade immunity, and the surge in flu. I can't say 100% certain, but I'm pretty sure we're going to start seeing a pretty significant fall surge and then a winter surge. My hope, of course, is that it's nowhere near as bad as the Omicron surge of last winter, but we're going to have a surge. There's no question. So we should be prepared for it. Don't be surprised when we have outbreaks in schools and the like. And again, we know kids need to be in school, so we don't want to shut down all the schools, but where there are outbreaks, there may be mask recommendations brought back in. Just be prepared for that. So I want to end this week with a bunch of shout-outs. This was Physician Assistant Week, so the physician assistants are really important. They're physician extenders. We can't really care for a lot of people without them, and they're an important part of the healthcare team, so congratulations to the PAs. Also, we were once again picked as one of the top 10 employers in the United States for healthy workplaces. So this is an awards program that is basically created to honor people-first organizations such as ours. We've always been doing really well, but we're in the top 10 in the United States again, and that's for organizations with more than 10,000 employees. So we're very, very proud of our institution. We do care about our employees, our staff, and our physicians, and our entire workforce, and we make sure that they feel that we're caring for them. Also want to congratulate the Houston Dash, the women's soccer team. They made it into the playoff run, so like our Astros. They're in the playoffs. That's very exciting. Also want to congratulate Dimmitt County. Last week declared National 4-H Week in Dimmitt County. I had no idea, but in case you're wondering, the 4-H's are head, heart, hands, and health. I didn't know that. You learn something new every day when you follow this little podcast. And then finally, of course, it's Halloween coming up, and we're just trying to figure out what Lily's going to wear. We've been trying to decide. There's a bunch of different costumes that she's asked you all to vote. So please email me in your preferences. You're going to get to see all of her contests, all of her costumes, and she's very excited about Halloween. So anyway, have a great weekend, and I can't wait to see you next week.